Welcome to Judy Quick, former vice president of GEM, very active in the Diocese of Alabama, very active in the American Friends of the Diocese of Jerusalem.
Thank you. Thank you, Titus. Hello, everyone. Nice to see old friends.
Lisa Sams is with us, Kathy Donahue, and Canon Feheli, the current Middle East Partnership Officer for the Domestic and Foreign Missionary Society.
Otherwise known as Tech.
But not 815.
Carol Van Rangel is joining us from Food for the Poor. John Beniste is joining us. He's the rector of Christ Church in Waukegan, Illinois.
Different John Beniste.
Well, it being 1 o'clock, let's begin. My name is Titus Pressler, and I'm the executive director of the Global Episcopal Mission Network, which is a network of dioceses, mission organizations, congregations, seminaries, religious orders, and individuals who are dedicated to gathering, inspiring, and equipping people for God's global mission. Our core values are humility, inclusion, and companionship. Humility, inclusion, and companionship. Mission Thursdays are held periodically, usually once a month, in order to gather, inspire, and equip people to participate in God's global mission. Our most recent one had to do with Sudan, and today we are gathering around the theme of mission companionships in the Middle East. And we are glad to be hosted by Standing with Iraqi Christians, and Buck Blanchard, who's the co-chair of the board of Stand with Iraqi Christians, will be our verbal host during the meeting. My other preliminary comment is that the Global Mission Conference that is organized by the Global Episcopal Mission Network will be held May 3 to 5 at St. Mark's Church in Tampa, Florida. And it will be preceded by a 2-day mission formation program to which all are invited. You can find out more about all of that at the GEM website, which is www.gemn.org. May the Lord be with you.
Also with
Also with you.
Let us pray. Oh God, we give you thanks. We give you thanks for one another. We give you thanks for the worldwide church that you have gathered in discipleship and mission. We give you thanks for all in the Episcopal Church who are dedicated to your global mission. We give you thanks for everyone who is here today. And we lift up before you with special concern Christians in the Middle East today, giving you thanks for their witness, for their faithfulness, for their discipleship, and for their mission. And we give you thanks for all in the Episcopal Church who are united with them in mission companionship. O God, you have made of one blood all the peoples of the earth, and sent your blessed Son to preach peace to those who are far off and to those who are near. Grant that people everywhere may seek after you and find you. Bring the nations into your fold, pour out your Spirit upon all flesh, and hasten the coming of your kingdom through Jesus Christ, our friend and Savior. Amen.
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 I now hand it over to Buck Blanchard to organize this particular gathering.
Thank you, Titus. I appreciate it. And thanks to all of you for being on the call. Good morning or good afternoon if you're out here in the West. I'm especially grateful to have the opportunity to have folks present about ministries in the Middle East. It's an area, as we all know, that people sometimes are a little bit frightened to get involved in, either because it's perceived as being too dangerous or too hard. I happen to think that those are the sorts of ministries that we should be focused on. If we're in the love business, we're called to love everyone, and sometimes they live in tough places. Those are the places I think we should be doubling down on, not backing off of. So we're going to hear from several people today with some specific ministries. But before we get into that, I want to introduce Paul Fahili, who's the partnership officer at Tech for the Middle East. So Paul, if you could tell us a little bit about what your role is and how that fits into the rest of the team.
Sure. Thank you, Buck, very much. The position I hold, as Buck indicated and Titus did earlier, is the Middle East Partnership Officer, and it's an absolutely fascinating position to hold in a part of the world that at times is fraught with what seems like unsolvable problems. And yet throughout the Middle East, it displays a faith which is incredibly strong. And I think at times we in North America, when we look at it seriously, find ourselves somewhat embarrassed by the strength and the way that their faith lives out. The province of the Episcopal Diocese of Jerusalem in the Middle East is responsible for the Diocese of Jerusalem, which includes Syria, Lebanon, and Jordan. It includes the Diocese of Cyprus and the Gulf. And I don't know if Bill is going to speak, but I'm not going to.
He is, yes.
Okay, I thought he might. So I won't say much about the Gulf side of it. Cyprus is a fascinating part of the world. We have in Cyprus 11 different parishes, 2 of which are in the north. And Cyprus, as you may know, is a split over what's known as the Green Line between North Cyprus, which is really under Turkish jurisdiction, and then the Greeks in the other part of it. Very few indigenous Christians in Cyprus, more expats and things. But what they've really begun to focus on is asylum seekers and doing some really marvelous outreach work there. As I said, the Gulf portion I'll leave to Bill, although it's an equally fascinating part of the world. And of course, we also had people from Standing with Iraqi Christians, and they can speak beautifully about Iraq, a place where I'll be visiting at the end of April, kind of in line with what was being said around dangerous parts of the world to go to. But looking forward to that. Another part of the province is the Diocese of Iran, and we actually have 4 churches in Iran, and there's still Anglicans there. They're very small, and whenever they do try to worship, they're very much followed and sought after by the Iranian police and others. They're discriminated against in terms of housing and in terms of employment because they are Christians. But the important thing is, and as I say, we're very, very small in numbers, they maintain a visible presence despite those constant threats and sufferings. And so to remember those Iranian Christians in our prayers is a fundamental thing to do. In Jerusalem, of course, again, another incredibly strong church despite small numbers. They sponsor so many different institutions of ministry and pastoral care. I think the last numbers I saw off their website were something around 35 institutions, 6,400 children, 1,500 employees, 10,000 people helping annually. So the Christians play above their weight level, in a sense, in terms of the work and the ministry. And what is centered throughout the Middle East, and you see this constantly, is a ministry of presence, a sense of not being able to evangelize in the way that you or I might want to in North America, but by living out the faith, using those words of St. Francis so beautifully said, preach the gospel, use words when necessary. That's how they live out their faith. That's how they evangelize. And that's a critical part of who that work is. Part of my role, an important part, is what's known as the Good Friday offering. And my hope is that all of you have heard of that and all of you participate in it. The Good Friday offering, of course, is right across the Episcopal Church and every diocese and every parish. And those funds, when they're collected, last year it would be in the range of $250,000. 30,000 goes to the province for its work. The rest is split by a decision of the province. The current split that they're suggesting is 66% to the Diocese of Jerusalem, 30%, 33% to the Diocese of Cyprus and the Gulf. And that decisions as to where that money gets spent and the like is done by the diocese in question. We enable them to be able to make those decisions through the gifts that you and so many others give. We have some important resolutions that came through General Convention last time, particularly thinking here about Yemen and the support for a new eye doctor there. Again, I think Bill will probably speak to that. We're also offering through the Diocese of Cyprus and the Gulf to support a priest in Yemen. And that's, again, another important way for that whole thing to move forward. So I represent the Episcopal Church in the Middle East. I represent the Middle East back to the Episcopal Church, trying to share the story, trying to learn in both cases from each other how best we can together serve for one another, pray for one another, and be evangelists for the good word of the Lord. I'm happy to answer questions if there's time for that, or you may want to move on, Buck.
Yeah, I think we'll have time for questions at the end. We'll just try to stick to the schedule for right now, but thank you very much. That's incredibly helpful. So we have 6 different presenters, official presenters today. Some of them are organizations that are large and you've heard of, and some of them are a little bit smaller and farther afield. And we'll start with one of those, an organization called Stand with Iraqi Christians. We have Chris Bishop, who is the founder and co-chair of that organization, to tell us a little bit about what they do. And as Titus said, in full and fair disclosure, I'm the co-chair of that organization, which is probably why they get to speak right up. Chris.
Thanks, Buck. Buck has requested that I say a little bit about the history of Christianity and sort of the biblical tradition in Iraq in general. So I'm going to move through that as quickly as I can and try to make sense for some of this, as the rest of the Middle East is. It's very complicated. So I guess a great place to start is in biblical times. The region we currently call Iraq was variously called Shinar, Sumer, Samaria, Assyria, Elam, Babylon, and Chaldea. It was also part of the Medo-Persian Empire, formerly known as Mesopotamia, or land between two rivers, referring perhaps to the fact that it is reputed to be the place where the Garden of Eden was located. The modern name of Iraq sometimes is translated as country with deep roots, and that could not be more apt. Now, the history of Christianity in Iraq, St. Thomas evangelized, the story goes, St. Thomas evangelized this region in the 1st century. By the 7th century, regionally, it was a Christian majority, Christian, with a substantial Jewish, Zoroastrian, and pagan presence in communities. But after the Islamic Revolution, just call it that, in the 7th century, and the establishment of majority Islamic communities, over the centuries, Christians have faced substantial challenges, from benign neglect to outright massacres. And there was way too much of that to try to go into today, but just suffice it to say, it's been a pretty tough haul for Christians in that part of the world. But what's really important, I think, for us to understand is how the crucial role that Christians have played in the country that we call Iraq from the beginning, in the political, economic, cultural, aesthetic history of this church. They have been an important part of the development and the goodness of that country. But to get sort of jump into the 20th century a little bit, a quick little story gives you a piece of this. The Western interest in Iraq has mostly been around oil. And so that's kind of our relationship to this part of the world. But it's useful to know that after World War I, King Faisal was installed by the Western powers as the king of Iraq, the leader of Iraq. He was assassinated and dragged through the streets. And my friend Sinan has let me know that every single Iraqi leader since Faisal has been assassinated. and many of them dragged to the streets. So that gives you an idea sort of what the nature of the place sometimes can be. Today, to bring us closer to today, it's important to recognize that I think we all are familiar with Saddam Hussein and the era that he represented. What's important to know about Saddam Hussein is he was a horrible, violent dictator, but he also kept the religious communities, the minority religious communities, for his own reasons, kept them from tearing each other apart. So when we got to 2003 and the US-led invasion, it really inaugurated a very, very difficult time for Christians in Iraq. Al-Qaeda was the major antagonist at that point, but persecution, emigration, all of this began to accelerate in 2003. But then if you jump to 2014, the US withdrawal from the region, military withdrawal from the region, and the rise of ISIS, man, things just went completely, just got horrible for Christians. And so the persecutions, the murders, and the emigration, everything that had been sort of going on to a lesser degree, accelerated. And so this brings us up to the moment where, for whatever it's worth, I became involved. I was just a priest in a parish in Pennsylvania, and a member of my community had been working over there. And at a Christmas event in 2014, told me about what was going on with Iraqi Christians, the Christians over there, and I didn't know anything about that, to my embarrassment. But it was clear to me, it was made clear to me by the voice of God, my own guilty American conscience, or my sense of adventure, all those things probably together. I went over there. During the war, I made contact with a Chaldean priest, Father Douglas Bazzi, who was running one of the best family relief centers, refugee centers, going over there. But it really introduced me to the whole, to the place and the people and the plight of these really extraordinary folks. And so let me just say something about the Christian communities that are present there in always diminishing numbers. There is the Chaldean Catholic and Assyrian Church of the East. There are the Syriacs. There are many Orthodox churches, including the Armenian Orthodox Church, that really grew after the genocide during World War I in Turkey. All of these groups, particularly the Armenians, I understand, have emigrated. So all these are much reduced in number. I believe it was in 2003, there was something around 250,000 Christians living and thriving in Iraq. There are today, I think, 2.5 million, and there are today, I think, 150,000. Those numbers could be off, but you get the idea of what's been happening. So when I was over there, I shot a film that ended up a documentary film that's on our website called Where Is Our Place, that really has made the difference in terms of opening up the ministry and the possibilities for other churches. It was really embraced by the Diocese of Pennsylvania, where I was at the time. Crucially, I met Sinan Kakarash, who was the outreach director for a large evangelical operation going on over there. He and I clicked, we've become friends. He's been responsible for largely responsible for a lot of the work that we've been able to do over there, which I will get to, I guess now.
Yeah, 'cause you've got about a minute left.
Minute left, thank you. So SWIC was formed in 2015 as a nonprofit, and we work primarily in Baghdad, Erbil, and the Nineveh Plains. We work in education, agriculture, and business development. All of these, SWIC's modus operandi is really sustainable development. That is what we have been trying to work on, because the Christians over there, what they really need are jobs and economic development so that they can stay there with their families and survive. The thing to know about these projects is that they are not expensive. This is not an expensive place to work. And I love Buck made the statement to me the other day, look, we're not giving these people a fish. We're not teaching them how to fish. We're restocking the pond. All the work we're doing is simply helping people get back to doing what they were doing before ISIS destroyed everything for them. I'm glad to tell you that really it's an historic event. We've got Father Faiz from St. George's in Baghdad and his assistant, my friend Sanan, are coming over here in May. They're going to be in Washington. They'll be meeting with Bishop Curry in New York, but they'll be in Washington at the National Cathedral, Ascension and St. Agnes, and meeting with government and NGO folks on Capitol Hill. Then we stop at the Philadelphia Cathedral for an event. And then they're in New York. They'll be at St. John the Divine, as I said, meeting with the presiding bishop at St. Bart's. And we are in the process of planning this trip. And I'm really interested in any feedback or thoughts you may have. And all I will say, and I'll wrap it up with this, is that this is really what motivates me. This is what keeps me kind of awake at night, is that this really is a very perilous moment for Christianity in Iraq. Period. The emigration is continuing, and all the Christians I've talked to over there have been very clear about that. If there's not some substantial help from the churches and the governments from the West, Christianity in Iraq is really going to have a difficult time sustaining itself over the next 20 or 30 years. And lastly, I'll just give you one last thing. My view is that if Christians disappear from Iraq, it is a wound on the body of Christ that we simply cannot heal. And so I hope that.
That's great, Chris. Yeah, thank you so much. Appreciate that. Next, we're going to hear from Bill Schwartz, who's the recently retired Archdeacon of the Diocese of Cyprus and the Gulf. Bill.
Thank you, Buck, and thanks for the privilege. I retired after just about 50 years in the Middle East, and so I've had experience mostly in the Diocese of Cyprus and the Gulf, but basically every other country in the Middle East except actually Syria for some odd reason. I'm going to start with a slideshow because we are dealing with issues that, frankly, Americans struggle to know what we're talking about. So let's get this thing up and going. Now, everybody see that map?
Yes.
Slide? Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. One of the things I've learned over the years is when we say Middle East, everybody has a different definition. And most people can agree on this particular presentation of the Middle East, which basically focuses from an Anglican point of view, the Diocese of Jerusalem. And I'm going to pick on Paul. Paul did a slip, which is very, very common. He said the Diocese of Jerusalem and the Middle East. There is the Episcopal Church of Jerusalem in the Middle East and the Diocese of Jerusalem. And this is a confusion that people in the pews within the Episcopal Church continue. Now I'm going to move to the next slide. This is a UN exposition of populations of countries that we associate with the Middle East, and the percentage of the population who are Christians. Paul also says something about indigenous Christians. I think he meant indigenous Anglicans, because the Greek Orthodox Church basically tries to run Cyprus, the Greek side of Cyprus. But you look at these percentages, and it's very interesting because the Christians who are Middle Eastern in nationality are centered in that East Europe, East Mediterranean area, with Iran and Turkey there as well. And that is, these statistics show the way they do because many countries in the Middle East don't count in these statistics people who live and work there, but who are not citizens. And that's an interesting dynamic that we need to be looking at. This is a map of the province. That green area is now become the province of Alexandria. Used to be part of the Episcopal Church of Jerusalem in the Middle East, but you've got the yellow, which is the Diocese of Jerusalem, the purplish, which is the Diocese of Iran, and then the pink or red or whatever, Diocese of Cyprus and the Gulf. And I want to thank Chris for taking care of Iraq, so I don't have to spend time on that. But I was Archdeacon, basically Bishop's assistant, for all of the countries in the diocese except Cyprus, because culturally, what we used to call the Gulf part of the diocese is Arabic speaking, Arabic government, a different inheritance from the Ottoman Empire than Cyprus. And of course, overwhelmingly Islamic in their, not just way of life and religion, but legal systems. More statistics, people think of Muslims in the Middle East, but if you look at this list, the countries that we're talking about today are not highly populated in Muslims because they're not highly populated. Indonesia is the most highly populated Muslim country. There's more Muslims in China than any of the Gulf countries except Saudi Arabia. And frankly, there's more Muslims in UK and in USA than in those countries as well. So that's just to kind of give you a break through some of those stereotypical things that we consider basically from the way the media as a whole presents the area. Come on, I'll move to another slide here. There we go. Looking at the Gulf Cooperation Council countries, as listed here, these are the percentages of people who live and work in these countries who are not citizens. Think about that. What if 88% of the people living in the United States were not citizens? Or turn it around the other way. If we had 8 foreigners for every citizen, it creates an artificial economy, artificial sociology. But what it does mean is there are hundreds of thousands into the millions of Christians living in these countries. And they have no rights, no identity, because they're not citizens. And the Diocese of Cyprus and Gulf forms the basis and the presence so that these people have Christian life worship. This is just another kind of presentation of those population splits. Saudi Arabia, total population, 34,700,000. The expatriates or migrants, for me, the same word, either applies to the same thing. We were all migrants. I was a migrant worker while I was living there. And you get the United Arab Emirates, only 11% of the population are citizens. So there are hundreds and hundreds of thousands of Christians looking for worship. And the Diocese of Cyprus and the Gulf is presenting opportunity. And when somebody asked me, what is your ministry? Some years ago, I had to think about it because I'm not an evangelist, I'm not whatever. I said, I try to make church possible in countries where that's not a given. That was what I did as Archdeacon. This is just more statistics, the same kind of demographic spreads. And then back to the area we're talking about as a whole. I don't know if this cursor shows for you, but Kuwait, Bahrain, Qatar, United Arab Emirates, Oman, Yemen, and of course, that little place in the middle of all of it called Saudi Arabia. I'm going to stop sharing here. That on a scale of 1 to 10 about freedom and democracy, Saudi Arabia is 50. So, yeah. But we in Cyprus and the Gulf are trusted by the governments because the government trusts the Anglican Church like they do the Catholic Church and the Orthodox Church. And so when they assign space for Christian worship, the Anglicans get space. And I remember when I got to Qatar to build the first, well, amongst the Catholics.
You got about a minute though.
Okay, thanks. The first churches since Muhammad, the guy said, the government official said to me, okay, you get to build for all the Protestants. And that is actually the scenario that Diocese of Cyprus and the Gulf has. We provide space for other denominations and nationalities to worship in our property. Qatar, there was 85 congregations using the property, 15,000 people on a Friday, because Friday is the day of worship. And we as a province, we as a diocese, we're always anxious to be as welcoming as possible to facilitate Christian worship and life for as many different ethnic, linguistic descriptions of Christianity. But don't ever let anybody tell you there aren't Christians in those countries. And they are Christians in the Middle East, even if they are not Middle Eastern Christians. Well, that's just part of what we need to think about in strategic ministry for the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. We all learned a lot there for sure. Moving on to an organization that most of us know something about, but may not know what they do today, the American Friends of the Episcopal Diocese of Jerusalem. We have Eileen Spencer and Heidi Schott.
Great. Thank you so much, Buck and Titus, for inviting us to be part of this call today. I recognize a lot of you and just really excited to be here. So Heidi and I are absolutely delighted to share with you about our work and how we're supporting the Diocese of Jerusalem's Christian witness in the Holy Land. We'll also be sharing with you a very exciting new study program, Bearing Witness, which American Friends of the Episcopal Diocese of Jerusalem, AFEDJ, is launching this year. Many of you are already familiar with AFEDJ, but for those of you who are new to our work, AFEDJ was founded over 30 years ago as a 501c3 to provide a safe, secure, and transparent way for friends in the United States to support the remarkable humanitarian institutions of the Diocese of Jerusalem. AFEDJ supports 25 humanitarian institutions located in Jordan, Lebanon, Jerusalem, the West Bank, and Gaza. These institutions include hospitals, schools, and centers for children with disabilities, serving everyone, regardless of religion, ethnicity, or financial means. Most important is that everyone is treated with respect. In addition to quality healthcare and education, families seeking care from these institutions also find a refuge from the horrendous living conditions, violence, and uncertainty that the future holds. They are offered hope in a part of the world where hope is often in short supply. These leaders of these institutions are the hands and feet of Christ, a powerful example of Christian witness. One of my favorite quotes from Archbishop Hossam is, "We do this work not for ourselves, but for Christians everywhere." Those serving Christ in the Holy Land display perseverance, commitment, compassion, and hope. They continue to bear witness to a legacy of a sustained Christian presence in this conflict-torn region, embodying the Christian values of equity, justice, and respect for the dignity of all of God's people. As Christians, you and I have a responsibility to support these leaders through prayer, service, and giving. American Friends, as you know, is a fundraising organization. And the bottom line is that the Diocese of Jerusalem needs our financial support. Through our fundraising efforts, we can help grow Americans' understanding of the economic, political, and social realities of life in the Holy Land and the positive impact the humanitarian institutions have on the lives of these very precious families and children. Each year, AFEDJ has an Easter appeal, which is separate from the Good Friday offering. This year, our Easter appeal is focused on raising funds for Jerusalem Princess Basma Center's Mother Empowerment Program. And our goal is to raise $90,000, which will support therapies and rehabilitation services for 50 families for the 50 days of Easter. So thanks to very generous partners, every dollar raised will be matched dollar for dollar up to $45,000. And if you'd like more information about this particular appeal, please reach out to either Heidi or myself. We're true partners with the Diocese of Jerusalem and welcome an opportunity to invite you into partnership with us. So now I'd like to introduce our Director of Communications, Heidi Schott, who will share more with you about an exciting new educational series that we're launching in 2023.
Thank you, Eileen. Hello to everyone. I think I may be the only person on the call who actually has a Holy Land Christian about 50 feet from me. We have Mark Zorab, whose dad is the only Episcopal priest. He's the Archdeacon for Lebanon and Syria. He's a freshman at University of Maine, and he's spending spring break with us. So he is right across the hall, probably not, maybe not up yet, hard to say, but we'll be eating Cheerios soon, I'm sure. But anyway, we're happy to be hosting here in our home one of the clergy kids from the Diocese of Jerusalem. Between 1988, around the time American Friends was founded, and 2018, the General Convention of the Episcopal Church passed no fewer than 17 resolutions that encouraged the Episcopal Church to learn about the faith, one of many things, but some are to learn about the faithful witness of Christians in the Holy Land, to better understand the Palestinian Israeli conflict, and to find ways to support the Episcopal Diocese of Jerusalem. And while there were, certainly some curated resource lists and perhaps some efforts in that direction, in 2018 or 19, American Friends decided it was time to make an education program for the whole church for free happen. So we partnered with the Standing Commission on World Mission to receive a Constable grant, did some additional fundraising, and the result was just launched on our website 2 days ago. It's called Bearing Witness, A Journey with Holy Land Christians. And it's a facilitated, using a trained facilitator, and we will do the training. It's a video-based education program designed for small groups in churches, either in person or online. And it consists of 5 90-minute sessions, and each session addresses a different theme of Jesus's ministry in that place. So belonging and identity, healing, teaching, breaking barriers, and building hope. And from the start, we knew that this program had to have the voices of Christians, Jews, and Muslims who live in the area every day. And so with our production partners and through the funds we had raised to be able to do this program, we were able to film after several delays because of COVID. We were able to film, we did, I think, more than 24 interviews with people across the region, and we're able to build those into videos that tell the story first of the challenges that people face in the various regions. So in Gaza, East Jerusalem, the West Bank, and Arabs in Israel, particularly Arab Christians in Israel, and the challenges they faced. And then another video for each session covers how the institutions of the Diocese of Jerusalem, the humanitarian institutions, the schools, hospitals, and centers for children with disabilities meet those challenges that they find their neighbors to be in. So whether that's teaching or healthcare, or breaking down the barriers for people with disabilities, or the building hope with the next generation of young Palestinians. So we're very, very excited. And each session will also include an invitation, not only to learn how to engage more deeply with the Diocese of Jerusalem and our brothers and sisters in that part of the world, but also to look at our own spiritual journey and that of our own church and say, how can we bear witness in our own community as well? So that's really a part of what we want to be able to share, the inspiring stories of the leaders who do their ministry in the Diocese of Jerusalem. So it's just been launched. You can find it at our website, afedj.org. It's called Bearing Witness. Next up is we're doing facilitator training. We're doing a small pilot with a certain number of congregations to get some feedback, and then we're going to share it with the wider church. So happy to take any questions, and would happy to put it up on the screen if anybody wants to get a better sense of sort of what it looks like. We have an introduction video that's on the main Bearing Witness page. So a short 5-minute video to kind of unpack with Archbishop Hossam Noam talking and others talking about the program. So thanks. We are very, very excited. I've watched some of these videos dozens of times, and there are a few that still make me tear up because they are just so poignant of people telling their stories.
Yeah, we'll hold questions till the end because we're trying to get through the other 3 presentations. Really exciting, but thank you very much. Really exciting organization called Jerusalem Peace Builders. I think we have Jack Karn. Jack, are you on?
Hello.
Great. If you could tell us a little bit about Jerusalem Peace Builders, that would be awesome. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you, Buck. And thank you all for joining us today. Good morning, good afternoon. I'm calling in from Denver, Colorado, and JPB's executive director is in the Holy Lands right now leading a pilgrimage, the Reverend Canon Nicholas Porter. So what a timely and profound time to be there. Jerusalem Peace Builders started in 2011 with 11 young Israelis and Palestinians and Americans for a summer peace building program in southern Vermont. And now we've grown to offer over 4 programs each summer for youth, for about 100 youth, as well as programs for teachers and programs in schools. We have over 30 in-school programs that are in Israeli and Palestinian high schools in the Holy Lands, mainly in Israel proper, for Israeli Jews and for Palestinian citizens of Israel that focus on leadership development and peace building and conflict resolution skills. And the vision of JPB is that teens will participate in these school programs, and then they will apply for summer institutes, which are held in the United States. And then they will return home for alumni programming as part of a 4-year high school program cycle, so that youth can participate in multiple years of school programs and summer programs to build relationships with their Israeli, Palestinian American counterparts, stay connected, and develop themselves and their leadership skills. In addition to the youth programs, our teacher training programs focus on bringing together Israeli, Arab, and Jewish teachers for programs in Jerusalem held at St. George's College, at St. George's Cathedral, just outside of the old city of Jerusalem, and then also at the University of Cambridge in England. Thank you. So the wonderful thing about our teacher training program is that it's accredited by the Israeli Ministry of Education, which helps provide 60 professional development hours to teachers who participate in the program, which is always a wonderful carrot. And what's great about this program is that these teachers are training how to bring peace-building pedagogy into the English language and diplomacy classrooms in Israel. And what that allows is for the curriculum of Jerusalem Peace Builders to reach more and more young Israelis and Palestinians, as well as people beyond our small shoestring budget and team of 5 or 6 people. And so it really leads to more systemic impact. I'll just share a couple stats with you. From our youth. The work is long-term social change through education. So we're planting the seeds of peace and many young Israelis and Palestinians, as well as with teachers who then will do the planting for us. And so that in 20 years or 15 years or however long, when those people are moving forward in life and career and direction, that they'll be in positions of power where they can make an impact on larger groups of people in the Holy Lands. And then, of course, for Americans to advocate and be connected to Christians, Muslims, and Jews living in the land. And we know when we have relationships with people in other parts of the world, we care, we love, and we serve. And so we have young people who are now in university and have graduated, who are clerking for the Israeli Supreme Court, who are lawyers for Google, who have given speeches in the Israeli Knesset on education. We've had participants who have participated in White House delegations. And we have a young person who is the only Arab engineer who's working on the massive new metro subway project in Tel Aviv that's currently being built. It's a wonderful accomplishment for that young person. One more thing I'd share about impact, and it's really in individuals. And of course, we know the power of how an individual can impact hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of people. We also have young people who have spoken to the UN Security Council as like youth delegates about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Because a lot of participants in our programs come through Model United Nations programs. One other additional thing we do is we lead pilgrimages to the Holy Lands. And of course, it's good to see you, Heidi. I know we've been connected before along the lines, and friends of AFEDJ and others, Eileen. But you know, the importance of bringing people to the land and then meeting with people in the land and taking those stories home to their congregations, which of course inspires giving and inspires mission and impact. So JPB is thrilled about the work that we do. Of course, it's very up and down. The pandemic was very challenging for us. We were one of the only programs to have summer institutes for youth. And last year, we had a record number of visas awarded by the US Embassy in Israel. And so we've always been a little bit under the radar, but have a tremendous impact above our weight, shall we say. And so this year, we're excited to have 2 programs in the United States this summer, as well as 2 teacher training programs, and inspire your giving inspire your prayers, and of course, inspire your participation. Thank you.
Great, Jack. Thank you so much, and welcome to Denver.
Thank you.
We're going to move on to Episcopal Relief and Development and find out what they're doing, particularly in light of the recent earthquakes and whatnot. We have with us Sean McConnell today. Sean?
Thanks, Buck. And I will focus strictly on the earthquakes. However, it's always good to hear from friends who work very closely with our partners in the region. And a lot of what our partners who are currently responding include the Diocese of Jerusalem. So I really enjoyed hearing what Eileen had to say about the work that is being done by the diocese throughout the region, including one of our partners, the Holy Land Institute for the Deaf, which has been working in Syria since before the war, but really has increased their on the ground efforts since the beginning of the war, and even though it is called the Holy Land Institute for the Deaf, they reach mostly children with different disabilities, and have set up programming in Jordan and elsewhere for those who have been displaced from the war. So we have a really incredible partner in the Diocese of Jerusalem and their existing partnerships that they have on the ground there. So I do want to just show you a little bit about, I'm not going to show you a slide, but I'll tell you a little bit about what we have been doing on the ground since February 6th. You might know this already, that the initial earthquake on February 6th and those immediately following are the most powerful and destructive earthquakes since the earthquake that hit Haiti in 2010. The numbers that we're looking at now are it's simply devastating. Over 50,000 lives lost in the region. The region is right on the border of Turkey and Syria, and so the impact has been felt most throughout Turkey. More deaths in Turkey than in Syria. However, both, Syria already had been devastated by warfare and other loss of infrastructure, which made it very difficult for immediate response following the earthquakes. It's been very difficult to gain access in both areas, not only because of the destruction from the earthquakes that made it difficult, but it was also already a very dreadful winter in the region. So much so that you might have heard in the past 48 hours, there is now severe flooding in southeast Turkey that is also making it absolutely impossible for responders to get into the areas where they are still needed. So it has been a really very difficult immediate response in both Turkey and Syria. However, there have been more than 140,000 rescuers from 94 countries that have come to join the 60,000 strong Turkish force. And the Syrian government only recently has declared a state of emergency, allowing for other countries to come in for the immediate response. So that took a little bit longer than it should have. However, now the kind of the first response pieces that need to be in place in Syria are coming into place. It has been very slow, unfortunately. However, we have heard the stories about people being rescued after 11 days, which is quite unusual, because usually it's you really need to get to people in 72 hours. Those first 72 hours are critical because dehydration becomes fatal after 3 days. And so that's why when these events happen, we really do need to be on the ground and moving very quickly. 16% of the area of Turkey has been impacted by these earthquakes. It's a smaller percentage in Syria. However, still the impact in Syria has been quite strong. I'm going to share with you in the chat after I'm done speaking a link to a video of a woman who had found shelter in in one of the churches of our partners in Syria, and it's a rather devastating 4.5 minute video of her talking about her experience and her children, but also the hope that she has because of the experience she received finding shelter following the situation. So in Syria, actually, even though immediate response and first responders had more difficulty on the ground, we actually had partners in place who could respond immediately. So that is because of the Diocese of Jerusalem. And also one of our oldest partners is the Middle East Council of Churches. So both of those partners have been on the ground and active in Syria since the immediately following the earthquakes. Our response in Syria has been immediate because of those partners. It's taken a little bit longer in Turkey. However, now we have two very strong partnerships, one with the International Blue Crescent Society, and that came to us from our long-lasting partnership that we have with Islamic Relief. Our partner, Islamic Relief USA, works very closely with us on our work to end gender-based violence in many different countries. And because of that work, we've been able to expand our partnership and work on the ground, especially in the existing partnerships they have with the IBC, the International Blue Crescent Society. So really the focus right now is in 4 areas. We're focusing on food, shelter, water, and hygiene. I mean, those are the primary needs at this moment. Beginning at the end of the second quarter of this year, we will really start moving into longer term reconstruction. And but still, because of the status on the ground, everything is still kind of first response type of responses, making sure that people have the food that they need, the water and the hygiene products. And when it comes to shelter, that includes winterization. Winterization right now is an absolutely necessary part of the response, and especially now with flooding being a part of the problem. So those 4 partners are really going. Thanks, Buck. I think other than that piece, I think that one of the most important pieces to remember is that none of these partners are focusing simply on one religious group. They only respond to the most vulnerable in these places and make sure that they have the resources that they need. There's no pre-requirements for program participants to come to these programs. Thanks, Buck.
That's great. Thank you very much. And thanks for the work that Episcopal Relief and Development is doing there. It's powerful stuff. Last but not least, we're going to hear from the Global Refugee Mission of New England, and we have Terry Jennings and Gail Campbell.
Good afternoon, and thank you for inviting us today. We have changed our name from the Syrian Refugee Mission to the Global Refugee Mission of New England to broaden our appeal to reflect the expansion of our humanitarian efforts worldwide in both Syria, Ukraine, and we've been helping local refugees and immigrants as well as Belize. Our mission is to emphasize long-term projects, providing educational opportunities, art therapy for children traumatized by the war or natural disaster, and for sustainability projects for the women in women's empowerment centers in Syria, with sewing and knitting, and the structure is within the women's empowerment centers and community action projects in Syria. We've been working with New Day Syria since we started, which was 8 years ago. And we first found out about Levi Syria because I went to a workshop at the Diocese of Massachusetts where Nadia Mulawa was represented and mentioned as a partner. And we started working with her at that time. 12 years of fighting there had certainly caused hardships for them. Excuse me. And more than 90% of the population live below the poverty line. Nearly 3 million more are at risk of being in hunger. The infrastructure of water, electricity, shelter has been battered. 5 million children have been born since 2011 with malnutrition now on the rise. And these children have stunted growth rates at 28%. The future for those born in these past 10 years is very problematic due to war, trauma, and starvation. And the latest earthquakes have made conditions more devastating and catastrophic. When we first started 8 years ago, we built an elementary school with funding from the Diocese of Massachusetts. We then rehabbed a building for a high school for girls. We did a science project, science labs and computer labs for them, and then continued to work with the diocese in getting a sustainable development grant for housing, and this past year put up some rehabbed some modular buildings that were prefab housing that they could move. Since the earthquakes, we have focused on obtaining more goods. They need food because of food insecurity. They need shelter. And so we're looking for tents and sleeping bags, blankets, and we're in the process of doing a major fundraising for that right now. I'm going to turn this over to Terry so she can continue this conversation.
With about a minute and a half left, I'd just like to share a little bit about what I know of the Syrian Christians inside Syria today. Generally speaking, along the northeastern border that is shared with Turkey, there have been large migrations of Christian Syrians out of the country since 2015. Many of them that have lived here migrated to either Europe, a few to Turkey, and the Gulf Coast states. And I think that was mentioned in one of our presentations about the presence of Christian Syrians there. In the northwest sector of Syria lies Idlib province. That is what you're hearing about in the news today. And we are supporting a tent community, a large tent community in the northwest. It's called Yishashagur. And unfortunately, as you probably now know, Idlib province is controlled by an extremist religious group called Hayat al-Sham, and they are enforcing their Islamic laws on the population. This means that along with a prolonged civil war and the bombing both by Russian and government air strikes, they have been destroying the infrastructure where Christians and Muslims who have lived together for centuries without any problems, but since the Civil War, they have now been embedded with this Islamic faction. As a result, the persecution and the marginalization of the Christian community is ongoing. This means that the illegal property confiscation of the Christian property is going on. that they have been denied humanitarian aid, or they're asked to stand at the end of a very long line when there is distribution of humanitarian aid. Also,
Got about a minute.
pardon?
You got about a minute.
1 minute.
1 minute, okay. As long as the civil war continues, the Christians are a very high risk. Only a small minority remain in northwest Syria today and are pressured to seek a life elsewhere. We know that originally in the capital city, Idlib city, in Idlib province, there were 20,000 Christians. There are now probably a very low thousand, if that, at this time. Out in the northwest section around the Jissa Shagur region, there were 1,500 Christians, and now there are only 70. So that gives you some idea of the mass migrations that have taken place. It's unconscionable that so many people have been left with so little for so long. And knowing that humanitarian aid is available to them, they know they're being supported, and this brings hope for their future.
Thank you so much. Thanks to all of our speakers. Titus, I'm afraid I didn't leave you much time, but I'll turn it back over to you.
Yes, indeed. Thank you all for presenting. Thank you for all for attending. This is really quite a survey of committed ministry and mission on the part of Episcopalians in the Middle East. And one of the takeaways for me is that I think a lot of Episcopalians feel that there's little to be done in the Middle East. As some of the speakers have noted, some Episcopalians are hardly aware that there are Christians in the Middle East. And all of our presenters have done such a wonderful lifetime work of raising the profile of Christians in the Middle East and helping people to understand the dynamics of that very difficult part of the world. I would return to one of the things that Buck said at the outset. We Episcopalians sometimes shy away from places that are dangerous. And remember Buck's word that actually those places are where we need to double down. And I think that's a good takeaway for all of us. We've come to the end of this hour. I'm very grateful on behalf of the Global Episcopal Mission Network for all of you attending, to Buck Blanchard and the Stand with Iraqi Christians group for hosting this particular conversation. And I welcome you all to the Global Episcopal Mission Conference that will be held in Tampa, Florida in May. You can go to the GEM website for that. But meanwhile, I hope all of you who are present here will continue to be in touch with one another. And if you'd like, we can circulate an email list so that people can be in touch with one another going forward. I think that would be a ministry for all of us.
Yes.
Yes.
So thank you all and God bless. And we wish we had time for questions and discussion, but the hour is up. And so carry on. God bless you.
Thank you, Titus.
God bless you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Happy Easter.